Anyway, so welcome everyone. Welcome to London, and let's get started. So where the sound is great. Oh, perfect. Good. Phew. Because they cost about 60 quid, those microphones. Perfect. So we are here exactly at the border of the City of London. So if I was to show you the sign of the street up there, this is Whitegate Street, and you see a little crest over the street name. That is the crest of the City of London. So the city is only one of them. And they have a different police force. They have a different mayor. It's the Lord Mayor of London that deals with the city. But at the moment, we are exiting the city. Hi, Ronilyn. Hi, Daden. Welcome everyone that just joined. And we're exiting the city. So this is Artillery Passage. So we are now outside of the City of London because you don't see the little crest anymore. So we are now exiting the city. So London has changed quite a lot since Victorian times, really. But this little street here, it's one of the only ones that really kept its Victorian atmosphere. It's still quite typical. And at the time, a street like this would have been extremely busy. A lot of the shopkeepers, they used to come in front of their shop. For example, butchers would be chopping the meat here in front of the shops with the pigeon droppings and everything. And you'd have, it was very noisy. Those Victorian shops, they're often quite deep because often you'd get in there, you'd have a counter, and let's say you wanted to buy a dress, you'd get in, you'd stop at the counter, they'll take your measurement and they'll make the dress at the back. And we had quite a few butchers because, of course, this area of Spitalfield was full of slaughterhouses. So there were a lot of people chopping meat. And that meant that if late at night you spotted a gentleman with a bit of blood on himself, you wouldn't necessarily get massively worried because he might be a butcher finishing his shift and going home. And let me flip the camera around. There's a lot of bins today, but I think it's just because it's Sunday. There was a bin strike a month ago, but I'm pretty sure it's finished now. And so yeah, when we say Victorian London, you probably imagine lovely horse carriages and gentlemen with a top hat and ladies with tiny little waist and beautiful dresses. Yes, in Westminster. Over here in the East End of London, it was completely overpopulated. It was full of homelesses. And the trash looks like the Hardy Tree, yes. And so you wouldn't really have many of the typical Victorian gentlemen coming here. If it did, though, if you had one of those gentlemen with the top hats and the cape and the ladies with the beautiful dresses, very often the lady would be quite close to the wall and the gentleman a bit more towards the middle, because at the time we did not have the sewage system yet. You'd still have people dropping their chamber pots through the windows. And of course, some of you might know where I'm going with that. We have a few expressions that comes from those days. So if you are from the UK or if you've been here before, you might have heard when we go to the toilets, we often call it the loo. This is because, back in the days, after the Norman conquest and all that, you still had a lot of people that spoke French, especially the aristocracy. And before to drop their chamber pots through the windows, they used to shout, "Garde à l'eau, garde à l'eau," which is Old French for "be careful with the water." Well, it was not exactly water, of course. And over the centuries, garde à l'eau, it became the loo. And there's another expression that comes from there. Hello. Apologies, it's not very polite, but I'm going to let you know anyway. Of course, you might have heard when you get a bit intoxicated, you might have heard, "Oh, I'm shit-faced." Well, this is because people that were a bit people that were sober, when they heard garde à l'eau, they used to hide away. But people that were a bit drunk, sometimes they would look up and they'd quite literally get, well, shit-faced. That's one of those Georgian shops there. It looks a bit Harry Potterish, really. It's really was them for the rain, of course, but for the pee you might get on your head. And of course, they didn't have any plastic for the waterproofing, so they used mercury. We know now, of course, that mercury is absolutely terrible for the brain, but they didn't quite know at the time. So that's why we had a lot of hatters that used to get a bit mad. And that's how we got the expression "mad as a hatter," or the Mad Hatter in Alice in the Wonderland. Lewis Carroll, he was also himself a Jack the Ripper. Quite similar to the workhouses. This was not a workhouse. It was managed by Catholic nuns, but it was pretty much the same system. Those workhouses, you might have seen one in a movie if you've seen Oliver Twist, for example. Are we losing the sound again? I don't know what's happening. I couldn't find anything with. Yes, sinners, you know, they really wanted to make sure they didn't have a good time. So if really you could not feed your kids anymore, you could not put a roof over your head. In and out. I don't know what's happening. Well, we can try without, but I do need to find out the microphone because we'll try without. So do you think it's so the thing is the let's try like this. So I don't have a microphone anymore. Let's see how it goes. If it's still happening, it could be the signal, but we'll see. So yeah, anyway, those workhouses, you did not want to live in there, but especially you did not want to die in there. Because what happened at the beginning of the 19th century, we had a massive demand for human bodies, for the dissections. At the time, the only bodies that were given to science were the bodies from the executions. There were some. The picture isn't too good. Well, it could be the signal. Then I don't. We'll keep on moving anyway. Hopefully, it'll be better later on. I kind of hope that it's the signal and not my microphone, but we'll see. Each time it looks. Well, I've got rid of the mic now, so it cannot possibly be the mic. But let's see. So yeah, you didn't want to die in because we have a problem with this now. So this is now cool, Elizabeth. So the body snatchers, they were of course those people going to the cemeteries and the graveyards to steal the newly buried bodies. And if the sound is still dodgy now, well, that's I mean, it could be Streamlabs, but usually with Streamlabs it was Dr. Benita, that's not the jack, because I've literally removed the microphone. So it has to be either a Streamlab or the signal. Hopefully it'll get better. I'm actually quite relieved if it's the signal, because then I don't have to buy a new microphone. Let's keep on moving. We'll see what happens. But so yeah, to stop the problem with the body snatchers, those bodies that were stolen from the cemeteries, in 1832 the church decided that people that died in here, their bodies would be given to science. So really, you did not want to die in the workhouse. It's yeah, apologies about the sound. There's nothing more I can do. So let's keep on moving to see if it gets any better. Yes, it might be the ghost. Anyway, little quiz time. I'm sure, I mean, a lot of you have seen this tour before, but do we know, or do we care to guess, how many victims Jack the Ripper had? Or how many have they killed in total? I said they, of course, because, you know, we don't know for sure that it is definitely a man. It could be a lady, it could be Jacqueline the Ripper, or it could be Jill the Ripper, who knows? 254, Mike, yes, possibly, who knows? 6'5", 432. Sandrine says we don't know. 6 or more, 5, 6, 11. Linda says 5. Well, the truth is, Sandrine is absolutely right. We don't know. Because we don't know who Jack the Ripper was. Obviously, we don't know how many lives they've claimed in total. In the autumn of 1888, the Metropolitan Police was investigating 11 suspicious deaths. One of them turned up to possibly be a suicide, so maybe 10. But tonight we'll focus on the five canonical ones. Now, personally, I think there's a Victorian London attack. That Nicholas Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. Now, you might have heard that the Ripper was killing sex workers. Yeah, maybe. But that's not a definite. At the time, the Metropolitan Police always assumed that any ladies out late at night, they had to be sex workers. You know, they were known as infortunates. That's actually debatable. Out of the 5, 2 of them had indeed sold their bodies at one point or another. It doesn't mean they were definitely soliciting that very night. And the 3 others, we do not know for sure. There's no evidence of that. Now, this church was the street there, that Christ Church, Spitalfield. And very sadly, at the time of the Ripper, the church was already there, and the graveyard at night was full of homelesses sleeping rough. They would literally sleep on the graves. That is because at the time, the Metropolitan Police did not really let them sleep on the pavement. They were kicking them away. So the only places where they could sleep were the little courtyards, the little graveyards, and is it still playing up now? Let's cross over. So yeah, whether they were all prostitutes or not, we do not know. But what we do know is the 5 of them were alcoholics. And the 5 of them probably drunk at that pub, the 10 Bells. Let me... Right, I've just had a message that it was trying to reconnect. Have I lost you? Are we here? It looks like we're here. So yeah, the 10 Bells, it's named after the bells in the church next door. And a lot of the pubs, we still, okay, good. So I've lost you for a few seconds. I don't know what's happening with the signal tonight, but good. You're back, so all good. So yeah, the pub, you've got a name and you have a little plaque with the illustration of the name. This is because back in the days, a lot of people did not know how to read and write. So if I gave you a meeting at the 10 Bells and you didn't know how to read, you'll check the illustration and you'll see a little bell, so you'd know that you are at the right place. And guess what? It is haunted. We have a lot of pubs in London that claim to be haunted, but I have to say the 10 Bells, it's the only one where I personally had some weird experiences. Well, just the one, but that was enough. One day after finishing this tour, I went down to the loo, to the ladies in particular. For many years I had heard that when you go down to the ladies, you might kill Lizzie. Now you might ask me, why is she lucky if she's a Jack the Ripper victim, Elizabeth Stride? Well, she was so-called lucky. Oh, the sound is gone. I think that must be the signal, because I've got I received a message about the signal. I don't know what's happening. I've done this tour thousands of times and signal was usually good here. Is it back? Well, let's keep going then. So yeah, so I had heard for many years that the ghost of Elizabeth Stride might be in the basement, and that very day, let me show you the photo I took. So the mirror looks very, very, very dirty because it's a fake mercury mirror. We're not allowed mercury mirrors anymore. It's a fake one. But I don't know if you can see, but it does look like there's some kind of a shape behind me. Who knows? Who knows? Of course, it could be Liz, but it could be any other ghost, you know. Anyway, so whether Elizabeth was indeed a Ripper victim, I'm not even sure myself, because, you know, she was not dissembled. She had a throat cut, very deep, but no organs was taken. We believe that, at least the consensus at the moment, is that the Ripper might have been interrupted, and then he might have run away to the city of London, where he struck again, and that would explain why she was not mutilated. But it could also just be a killer. Who knows? Anyway, across the street here, you need to skip the loo when you are dead, yes. Anyway, across the street, this used to be the entrance of Dorset Street. There's not much to see today because there's a new build that completely covers it. But Dorset Street was known as the most dangerous street in London. Apparently in the 1890s, even the Metropolitan Police did not want to go unless it was for officers together. And at the back of Dorset Street, you had Miller's Court. That's where the last victim was found. The last of the canonical five, Mary Jane Kelly. Mary Jane was the only victim that was found indoors. Most of the other ladies, they would have been killed, cut, ripped open in a dark corner in probably less than 15 minutes. But with Mary Jane, or Marie Jeannette, as she liked to be called, the killer had all the time he wanted to do his weirdest fantasies. And, well, he did. It was, when she was found in the morning, it was a butchery. I'll spare you the details, but if you want, there are photos on the internet. I have decided not to show you any post-mortem photos of the victims in my tour, because I thought if I was going to be murdered myself, I wouldn't really want pictures of my naked, dissembled body to be exposed to virtual voyagers many years later. But if you are curious, you can just pop their names down on Google and you can see the photos. She had not only had she been ripped open on everything, but she had almost been skinned. Some of the skin that had been folded and placed on the bedside table. It was a butchery. And Mary Jane was a little bit younger. She was in her 20s, where these are victims were street here, Fournier Street, because it is for me the opportunity to tell you about the different waves of immigration that shaped this area of Spitalfield. And the first one were actually the French, the Huguenots. They were the French Protestants. You might know we had some wars of religion in France as well, and we had some massacre like the Saint Barthélemy massacre, and the Protestants that were fighting for freedom of faith, a lot of them moved here. And a lot of them were into the silk industry. So we don't see much of that at night, but when you see the top of the building, you can see they had little windows on the last level to use the daylight to do the silk. Anyway, and there was another wave of immigration in the 1880s, a lot of people from the Jewish community. And the last wave of immigration, you might be able to see from the sign up there, it is people from Bangladesh. So you can see the sign, it's written in English and then in Bengali language. So that's quite cool. It's the local authorities that write it in their language as well. And it's quite nice. So now it's a very diverse area. And that's why it's so different from the rest of London. Anyway, I'll show you where the second victim, Annie, was found. Little... Hold on, someone is... I just heard some glass flying, so I don't want to go in the middle of a zone that's... What's happening? I think someone has just thrown a can or something, a bottle of beer. Anyway, so I'll show you where Annie was found. It's not the actual spot. She was found at the back, on the parallel at 29 Hanbury Street. But no, don't worry. I think he's just rolled over a bottle of beer or something. Yeah. See, I thought someone had thrown a bottle, but no, it's the car. They've just rolled over a bottle of beer. There's glass everywhere on the floor in London. It's terrible for the bicycles. We keep having punctures. Anyway, so yeah, I'm not showing you the original building because it's been destroyed. Because it's similar, it would have had look very old because they use it for filming. They literally rent it for filming. Anyway, Annie was found in the morning in the little courtyard. So again, it's not this building here, but it would have looked very similar. On the door in the middle, most of those little houses here, that actually leads to a little courtyard at the back. That door would have been left open all night. The local sex workers were aware of that, and the local homelesses as well. The door was left open because in the courtyard at the back, they used to have the chamber pots, all the human waste. And that was, would you believe, valuable. There was a gentleman called the Night Soilman. He was coming at night and he was collecting the fertilizer in the fields. And so that's why the door would have been left open. You had at the time, you could have up to 50 people living in a building like this. There was no space for privacy whatsoever. You could have a full Victorian family living all together, cramped in one little bedroom. So you can imagine one teenage daughter cooking dinner next to a little boy taking a poo in a chamber pot, next to the parents making more babies. Literally no privacy whatsoever. And when Annie was found, first thing in the morning, so it was already bright. She's the only victim that was found at daytime. There was only the second of the canonical 5, but there had already been a few murders in Whitechapel, so it was a big deal in the press. the Jack the Ripper story really was like the first international tabloid sensation, really. The press was all over it. The morning when they found the body, they started to sell street food and lemonade and stuff because people all rushed here. People living next door, they started to pay. They'll charge you for entry. You could pay a penny or two, come upstairs into their bedroom to look through the window, to see the pathologist, to see the police and the dead body, of course. So there was already this kind of macabre fascination for the Ripper story. And the body was found missing a couple of items, really. She was missing a couple of teeth, but that's not surprising. She got into a fight a couple of days earlier over a bar of soap. So those ladies, I don't want you to imagine them physically vulnerable. Those ladies were rough. They were alcoholics. They were ready to fight. Let me show you those beautiful windows here. So, and she was also missing 2 little rings, fake, not over a bar of soap. And the other lady, I think her name was Eliza, she was even more damaged than Annie. So yeah, violent fights for nothing. And she was missing 2 little rings. That was odd. They were fake. They were not, no silver, no gold, nothing. And it's not like if she could have left them at home. She had no home, like most of the victims. So, you know, could it have been taken as a little souvenir, a little trophy? Who knows? Of course, they already had the uterus as a trophy, but yeah, we will never know, really. So we're now arriving on the famous Brick Lane. So this is the best street to come if you want a curry or Asian food in general. You have a lot of amazing restaurants here. Today it is very trendy. It's actually very expensive to live here. Did I say the last wave of immigration was the people from Bangladesh? No, the last wave of immigration, it's actually the hipsters. The hipsters, they came with their quinoa and their tattoos and vintage watches and shoes. And today it's actually very, very trendy, very expensive. And the thing here, if you see the top, this so it used to be a Huguenot church, then it became a synagogue, and it is now a mosque. So it's kind of showing the different waves of immigration. And it's a listed building, so inside you still have some engravings in Hebrew. They're not allowed to change it because the building is protected for its historical importance. And nice moon, yeah. And the street today, so again, very expensive. Back in Victorian times, not at all. It was full of what we call dust houses. So they were the accommodations for the very poor. A bit like a youth hostel, but instead of having 12 people in a room, you might have, I don't know, 30. And if you had 4 penny, you could buy yourself a bed for the night. But when I say a bed, let me show you what type of bed, because they are not exactly what I would call a bed. That's what you'd get for 4 penny. So, not ideal. Oh, no, the 2 penny. Sorry, showing you the wrong. 4 penny. That's like really. And for 2 penny, well, you've already seen it, you'd get the rope. I know it's hard to imagine how, like a washing line, really. It's hard to imagine that that's more comfortable than the streets. But remember, sadly, they couldn't even really sleep on the streets. The police would push them away. So the only places where they could sleep were those little courtyards or those little graveyards. So that was better than the graveyards. And some believe that the expression to be hungover, some believe it actually comes from the lines. That they woke up in the morning, they remove those ropes, they'd call it hangover. Personally, I don't buy it. I think hangover comes from the executions, because we have a lot of expression that comes from those executions. And because they were full of alcohol, like a festival today, sometimes the day after the hangings, you woke up feeling a bit dry, so that could be quite literally hangover. Some even say that hangers on, people that kind of attach to you for financial reasons, that could also come from those ropes. Who knows? Anyway, this is now Fashion Street, and again you see the two languages here on the street sign. Hangover. Yes, I agree. I think it comes from hanging. Well, we've got a few expressions that comes from hangings. Laughing your head off, to be on a wagon, a last one from the road. So you can see that they were very casual about those executions. So I really, I strongly believe that hangover, it's probably the same, but who knows? Anyway, back to our victims. So those ladies, very sadly, they were all on the streets. They would, whenever they had the money, they could buy themselves one of those beds for the night. But sometimes they didn't have the money and they would be sleeping on the streets. And most of those ladies had been married, but the dynamic at the time between men and women was so unfair. It was, for a lady divorced, it was mission impossible, really. In terms of job opportunities, of course the men could be very poor as well, but the men, they could go on queue at the docks for one day of work, and then they'll have enough for a bed, For ladies, it was really hard, because of course ladies didn't get the same type of paycheck, and educated. There was hardly anything they could do. Eventually, yes, and the last thing they could sell was their bodies. We just don't know that that's definitely what they were up to. And this lovely establishment here, it's fairly new now. They do it's like a noodle bar. Some of you have seen that we've done that tour before, and you've not seen this one. It used to be a pub, a Victorian pub called the Frying Pan. Oh, did your grand tell you could sleep on the washing line? Oh, interesting. See, yeah. So yeah, the top, you can see it used to be a Victorian pub, because that's quite typical in the corner there of the Victorian pubs. So the Frying Pan, that's where Polly Nichols spent her last night. She was drinking in the establishment, and then she tried to go back to the lodging house where she had been spending the last 2 weeks, down that way, and she didn't have the money. And the boss said to her, "No, Polly, you know the drill, no pay, no stay." And Polly famously said, "Look at my jolly bonnet, I'll soon get my dust money." Now that little phrase has been used to prove that she was indeed a prostitute. If you ask me, it doesn't prove anything. Like, yes, she could have said, "Oh, look at my jolly bonnet, I'm gonna go on solicit and I'll get my money." Yeah. It was about the same price, by the way. It was about 4 pence for the job of a prostitute in a dark corner. And or maybe she meant, "I'm gonna go and sell it. I've got a jolly bonnet, I'm gonna go and sell it." Who knows? Or maybe she meant, "I've got a jolly bonnet, I'm gonna go and beg." For them it was often a vicious cycle. They'll go and beg or sell their bodies, then they'll have the 4 pints, which is the price of a pint of gin, because they used to drink gin by the pint. So sometimes they'll drink it away, then they'll have to find the 4 pence again, and then if they didn't have it, eventually they'll end up on the street anyway. Polly, she said she had her dust money 4 times that night, but she drank it away. And very sadly, she never came back to the lodging house because they found her. But already made a few murders in the area, so it was already a bit of a thing. And the gentleman that found her body, Yeah, a pint of gin. We don't know, Jenny. We don't know how strong it was at the time. It's really hard to tell because anyone could brew it at home. Sometimes they brew it in the bathtub. But yeah. And the... oh, did you see a kitty cat? I didn't see a kitty cat. No. And no, I was looking at a black thing, but it's not a kitty cat. Yeah, when her body was found, it was a gentleman called Charles Cross. He also goes under the name Charles Lechmere. He was on his way to work when he spotted a bundle of clothing on the floor, like a pile of rags, and he was like, yeah. Because at the time, fabric and clothing was very much more expensive than it is today. You know, you'd find a pile of rags and you could sell it. You could sell anything at the time. And as he got closer, he realized it was not a pile of rags. It was a lady. And he got very close to the body when someone came behind him. And then together they decided to go and fetch a police officer. Now, in today's ripologist world, he's actually a very good suspect today. Some ripologists today believe that when the guy came behind him, Charles Cross was not in the process of finding Polly, but in the process of killing her. It would make sense. He's a good suspect. He was on the scene of the crime. But, you know, with those Jack the Ripper suspects, you can read a new book, watch a new documentary, and be absolutely convinced about the suspect they're trying to promote. There's a documentary somewhere online about Charles Cross, and it's a tiny little bit misleading. There's a sketch when they kind of draw him kneeling over the body. He never actually kneeled over her. And when you go back to the facts, really, there isn't that much. And actually, when the second guy came behind, the second guy wanted to sit her up. And Charles said, no, I don't want to touch her. If indeed he had been the killer, don't you think he would have wanted to touch her? To think, you know, to have an excuse, to have some blood on himself? Who knows? Who knows? And... oh, well, it's not... I feel very safe, Linda, don't worry. There's nowhere in London where I don't feel safe. Actually, I'm probably safer here than at home. I've been burglared twice this month. The same guy, he keeps coming in. The day I went to Romania at 1 a.m., the burglar was actually on my floor. Anyway, let's move on. So don't worry, I'm safe. So yeah, I didn't even tell you, by the way, why we've called him Jack the Ripper. The Whitechapel Vigilance Committee that had been created for the well, Rosemary, yeah, but I live with 48 people, so they often don't close the door properly, and the burglar actually came to a house party because anyway, let's not talk about that, because we don't even confront people when we see them in the corridors because it's so many of us. We don't all know each other very well, or you'd think it's a friend of a friend. So he was actually on the dance floor before to come back on steal the house. Anyway, so back to Jack. The Vigilance Committee, as well as the police and the press, they used to receive a lot of letters. Most of them very probably hoaxes, hundreds of those letters, and they all claimed to be from the killer. And one of them was signed Jack the Ripper. So that's how we got the name. But he was probably never ever called Jack. Let me show you where we are. We are on the Petticoat Lane Market. Today the street is no longer called Petticoat. Apparently Queen Victoria found it a little bit too titillating, so they've renamed it, but the market is still called Petticoat Lane Market. And at the time, in 1888, a lot of the traders would have been from the Jewish community. To give you an idea, on Brick Lane, where we were a few minutes ago, there were at the time 27 Jewish tailors on the street. So a lot of business owners were Jewish. And In terms of suspects, I'm gonna only mention three of them tonight because we don't have time to go over the 300s. But one of them, I feel like I have to mention him because he ticks all the boxes. It is Aaron Kosminski. Most of the ripologists agree, and actually all the profilers agree, that the killer would have been a very local man. Whether he lived here or whether he worked here, we don't know, but he would have known those streets like the back of his hands to be able to run away that quick from a murder scene. And Kosminski was a very local man, if indeed it is the Aaron Kosminski we believe, because there were a few Kosminski in the area. Aaron had worked as a hairdresser. The hairdressers, they had some basics of anatomy. Because you might know the hairdressers, they used to do minor surgery. That would be a good band name, yes. They used to, even in Victorian times, you still, like if you had a teeth that you had to get pulled out, you'd go to the barbers. You can, if you have a knife and you can cut hair, why not cut off verrucas or whatever? So they had some basics of anatomy because, those ladies were ripped open and organs removed very quickly in a dark street. The streets at the time would have been even much darker than they are today. And it was not, you didn't have feces everywhere. It was fairly well cut. Well, we don't know whether he actually got the organs he wanted, He took up most of the uteruses, but did he want the kidneys? Who knows? But thank you so much, Elizabeth. If we assume that he did grab the organs he wanted, then he would have been quite good with anatomy. Was he a surgeon? Was he a barber? Or was he a butcher? Because, the anatomy of a pig is not that different from the anatomy of a human. So who knows? And that's what led historians to speculate that he might have been a doctor. But we also have a lot of people that claim that Jack the Ripper might have been from the Jewish community. Thank you, Janie. After they found the fourth victim, so Catherine Eddowes, we'll go and see the crime spot in a moment. So that's the second one of the night of the double event. A couple of hours later, right here in front of that door, they found an apron that belonged to Catherine. It was identified. It was literally cut off from Catherine's apron. And it was full of blood and feces. So that was definitely from the scene. Who knows? We don't know. What we do know is that above the gate there was a little graffito. I say graffito because graffiti is plural. So graffito is, if there's only one. It was written on the wall just above the piece of apron with chalk. And it read, kitty cat. It read, the Jewess won't be the man to be blamed for nothing. Come, kitty cat. No. You're not gonna be a superstar. And so yeah, the Jewess, it was spelled G-U-W-E-S. So did they we don't know. And won't be blamed for nothing. There's also a problem with a double negation here. So that's another mistake. Personally, I find it very unfair to assume it's from the killer because there were already a bit of, quite a lot of anti-Semitism in the area. So, there probably were quite a few of those anti-Semitist graffitis. So for me, I find it quite unlikely that a killer running away from a murder scene would have taken time to do a little graffiti, but who knows. Kosminski, he did happen to be Jewish. Kosminski, he died before the end of the. He didn't die. He was taken into an asylum. He was what we called a lunatic. He was addicted to masturbation. He had sexually assaulted his own sister. So he does tick all the boxes. And because he was locked up before the end of the inquiry, not my favorite graffiti here, that could explain, thank you, Linda, that could explain why the murder have stopped. Who knows? The serial killer, usually they question, do not stop for no reasons, unless they're being locked up or unless they're being, locked up in a prison or in an asylum or moving away. This is a very Jack the Ripper inspired piece of street art. That one has been here for years. Usually the average span of a piece of street art in London it's about 3 months, but this one has been here for years. That one is quite nice. That's on the right hand side, that's a French artist called Zabou. On the left hand side, it's Jimmy C. Jimmy C. He spent a bit of time in Australia with the Aborigine doing 20 years. So he studied those. Anyway, back to our aspects. So Kosminski, not my favorite, but does tick all the boxes. So that's why I feel like I have to mention him. And my second favorite, it's not actually my favorite. I mean, I don't think it's very much believable, but it's such a good story that I need to tell you anyway. It is Prince Eddie. Eddie was the grandson of Queen Victoria, the first grandson. Let me show you. We are back in the city. We can see the little dragons here. So that's the crest of the city again. And up there, you can see the little crest by the street name. So now we are on the patch of the City of London Police. And Prince Eddie, his name was Victor Albert. The royals, they actually choose their names. So it's all very confusing. He was a bit different. Queen Victoria herself had some doubts about his intellect. And he was the grandson of the Queen. So in the line of succession, he was like the little George today. So he would have been king one day. He died very young. He died in an influenza epidemic. But he apparently loved the prostitutes. And there were some very fancy prostitutes in Westminster. But no, he loved the one from here. He loved the ones from Whitechapel. And it is said that he might have fallen in love with one of them, secretly married her, and that sex worker got pregnant. So technically, that baby, because they were married, would have been the heir to the British throne. Now, some said that the Queen heard about the baby. Some even said that Mary Kelly was blackmailing the Queen, and that she decided to ask her physician, Sir William Gull, to eliminate the 4 prostitutes that were aware of this royal baby. Little pause in the story. We were talking about the barbers earlier. So this is the sign of the barbers. You see the red on the white? It represents the blood on bandages. Because the barbers, they had those dirty bandages full of blood that they were cleaning after the mini surgeries. So that's why. Anyway, so yeah, the Queen might have asked her physician to go. I said 4 prostitutes, not 5. I'll tell you at the end of the tour why not 5. Because one might have been targeted by mistake. And it's a nice story. It's the story that you might have seen in the movie From Hell with Johnny Depp. But Sir William Gull, he was in his 70s and he had suffered a stroke. Would he have had the physical strength to deal with ladies that were rough and ready to fight, like Annie Chapman? I'm not sure. Unless really they were sleeping when he came and they didn't have time to I don't know. Personally, I'm not convinced. There's no evidence whatsoever that backs up this story anyway. But yeah, so that's the royal conspiracy theory. There's also some that claim that it might have been Prince Eddie himself that did it. It could make sense because Prince Eddie was said to be suffering from syphilis, and syphilis, it has different stages. After many years, you can get neuronal syphilis, and the symptoms are like very strong mental health issues. And if indeed he caught syphilis from sex workers, he could have wanted to have a revenge and, kill them. But Eddie actually has an alibi. One of the murders, Prince Eddie was in Balmoral in Scotland with the Queen. He was having dinner with Queen Victoria. So it's just not possible. It's a nice story and it does make nice movies, but it's not very believable, I'm afraid. And let's go and see where Catherine Eddowes was found. Catherine, she's my favorite of the victims. I do strongly believe that we spend way too much time talking about the Ripper and who they might have been, and not enough time talking about his victims, really. So I always try to tell you little snippets of their lives in my tours. And Catherine, she was... she's always been a bit of an outcast. She never married. She had a boyfriend that was a peddler. He would go from town to town selling little items. And when they got together, she started to write funky poetry following the executions. Until 1868, you still had public hangings. And that was such a party that people wanted a souvenir when they went to see the executions. So Catherine was writing some funky poetry, often pretending to be the last speeches of the criminal. And she would be telling her poetry out loud on the streets. So that's why she's my favorite, because she's almost like a Victorian stand-up comedian, and or a street performer at least. She was a terrible mother. She did kind of leave her behind a couple of years, but for the fact she did not choose to have children. At the time, you didn't have such option. You didn't have any contraceptive or anything. Well, not for the working classes, at least. Yes, Ronnie. Yes, the chief did work with knives. They could have done surgery as well, but it was not their usual trade. At the time of Henry VIII and all that, it was the guilt of barber and surgeon. It was literally the same. Anyway. In Victorian times, of course, prostitution was illegal, but the authorities, they knew that it was going to happen anyway. So they came up with a set of rules. The prostitutes, they were not allowed to loiter. They could not stay in one stand. They had to keep on moving, and they could not they could not approach a gentleman. They had to wait to be approached. And apparently at night, you had around the church here 100 prostitutes a night walking around in circles, because that's where they are moving, and that the gentleman knew where to find them. It doesn't mean Catherine was one of them, because she was busy that night. She had partied with her boyfriend. The both of them were penniless, and she had told him that she was going to go down to Bermondsey to beg her daughter for money. Now, we know that did not happen because her daughter actually had given her a fake address. Her daughter did not want to see her mum anymore because she was always drunk. She was too much. She was probably quite intense, that lady. And a couple of hours later, she was found here on the streets, very drunk. She was on the floor making animals noises. We've all been there, right? And she got arrested by the police. They took her to Bishopgate police station. And they said to her, "What's your name?" And she said, "Nothing." So they put Nothing into a cell where she slept a couple of hours. And then she woke up and she was annoying the police. She was singing in her cell and she was like, "When are you gonna let me go?" And eventually the police said, "We'll let you go when you can take care of yourself." She said, "I can do that for right now." So they were like, "Okay, we'll..." I had lost the chat for a while. Now everything is coming. So if I've missed any of your comments, apologies. Eventually they let her go. But they said, "Before you go, we need a name and address." And she said, "I am Mary Ann Kelly and I live 6 Fashion Street. We've seen Fashion Street earlier. And that is not true. She was Catherine Eddowes and she did not have an address. She was homeless. Now, because of that name, Mary Ann Kelly, that is very similar to Mary Jane Kelly, the last victim, some people have assumed that she might have been targeted by mistake, that the actual target was Mary Ann Kelly. And she had given that name to police and later dead. So people have even speculated that police have been involved. Personally, I'm not convinced either, because when you use an alias, I actually use Kelly myself. If I go on a dodgy page of the internet and I have to put a name, I'll put Kelly. You use the same alias many times because you need to remember that it's you. So I wouldn't be surprised if she had used the same alias with different people, not the police, but hey ho. Anyway, so she was released about midnight, and an hour later, we had PC Edmund Watkins coming here at 1:30 a.m. This area, this square, Myrtle Square, it has not changed. Well, the buildings have changed, but the geography, it's pretty much the same as it would have been at the time. And because we're very close to the docks, St. Catherine's docks, those warehouses here, they were full of very expensive goods. Tea, rum, sugar, tobacco, expensive stuff. So that required police presence every 15 minutes. Watkins, Gate Police Station, he came doing his patrol. He came down this way with his lantern, 1:30 a.m. He did not see anything of interest. He left. 1:35 a.m., there's an eyewitness. I wouldn't trust the eyewitnesses too much on the Ripper story, because in the middle of the night in Whitechapel, everyone was drunk anyway. But there's an eyewitness that claimed that they've seen at the end of Church Passage. Now it's not called Church Passage anymore, but they've seen a gentleman talking to Catherine just there. Who knows? 1:35. 1:45, so 15 minutes after the first patrol, the same police officer, PC Edmund Watkins, came back. And right here, he spotted on the floor what he believed to be a drunken lady first. He got a bit closer, and it was not a drunken lady. It was, very sadly, Catherine's body. She had been brutally attacked. She's the only one that has a little plaque. Not only was she dismembered, but he had cut off some triangles in her cheeks. Her kidney was missing, as well as the uterus. There was a kidney, by the way, that was sent to the Whitechapel Vigilancy Committee, a little package that was signed Jack the Ripper, with half a kidney on it, said, "I've eaten the other half for dinner, ha ha ha." Unfortunately, the scientists at the time were not capable of telling you for sure whether it was indeed Catherine's kidney. But it is possible. We still don't know. It could have been the one. Who knows? And she was the fourth victim. She was the one of the double event. And that's it. Now let me tell you about my favorite suspect. I have no idea, we don't know, we will never know. But there's a gentleman that I think is a good candidate. His name is Francis Tumblety. He was not from around this part. He was from New York, the state of New York, from Rochester. And he had killed a few people by accident. He was known as the Great American Doctor in Liverpool. He was selling some drugs, powders, pretending to be from Native Americans, and that actually killed a few people in Liverpool. Let me show you his photo. And he left, he went back to New York, and the murder stopped. Let me show you. There he is. He was never in the army. I know he looks like some kind of Russian army officer, but no, he was a quack. He was never even a doctor anyway. And he had stayed here. He had been in a lodging house here where they found some kind of pornography in a bag. Even in Rochester, in the state of New York, he was selling some. There's a canal there in Rochester, and by the canal he was selling some Victorian pornography. I have no idea what that looks like. When he died, years later, maybe 15 years later in Rochester, he had in his possession, well, first he had some friends that had been invited for dinner at his home, where they claimed that they had been invited into his basement, where he proudly showed them a collection of uteruses in little jars of alcohol or glycerine to preserve them. Now, with our sensibility of today, we're like, oh, that must be him. But at the time, it was weird, but it was not that weird for a physician to be keeping body parts. Now, what is really weird is that when he died, he had in his possession a lot of wealthy items, items of clothing, and he was quite rich. And they found 2 little rings, fake, identical or very similar to the ones missing on Annie Chapman's body. And of course we know now that the serial killers, they often take a little trophy, a little souvenir. So that's why he's my favorite. But again, who am I to know? Hundreds of ripologists over the years have not been able to agree on a conclusion. So we will never know. Anyway, that's gonna be the end of the tour. How is the sound at the moment? I don't know if the signal is good because the chat keeps going in and out. Are you guys here? Ooh, looks like I've lost the chat. Let's give it a moment. It could be my signal again. I was gonna try to taste my microphone, but there's no point because I cannot see the chat. I don't know if you can still hear me, but if you can, thank you very much for coming tonight. I don't have the chat for some reason, but I hope you enjoyed it despite the little sound issue at the beginning. If you want to see a bit more of me, on Tuesday I'm not telling you actually, it's the Monopoly tour, Waterworks. So I'm gonna take you somewhere connected to water working somehow. So that's on Tuesday. And Saturday we're going to Barnes. So I'll tell you the story of the Barnes mystery. And thank you very much for coming today. It's a bit odd because I don't see the chat, so I cannot say bye-bye. But if any of you drop me a tip, you very, very much appreciated. That's thanks to your generosity that we can keep, doing those tours and creating those lives. So thank you very much. And I'll see you soon. Have a good evening or good morning, whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. Bye-bye.